We are from Group E are going to present on the topic of climate change, a study on the effectiveness of international legal framework to combat the biodiversity loss. I'm Narmatha Yogeswaran and my matrix number is 049406.
My name is binti Shukor, metric number 050132.
I am Nur Wahidah Kamilah binti Razalli and my metric number 050137.
I'm Sheimra azhila nandan and my metric card number is 049769.
My name is Yasheni and my metric number is 049551. So now I'm going to talk about the introduction of this topic. Biodiversity is equals to essential with the human needs, and there are many sources it can contribute from the biodiversity, and there were many international agreements established on the occasion of biodiversity conservation. The Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) consents on the legal status of any country, territory, city, or area of or delimitation of its frontiers or boundaries, as well as helps to identify and address such threats. While the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change (UNFCCC) was established to achieve the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that will not cause any dangerous interference with the climate system. Okay, now I would like to talk about the materials and methods. This paper uses the qualitative method to conduct a deep exploration of the survey. To get a good improvement in research, an analytical approach has been taken to examine the evaluation of rules, principles, concepts, and theories that had been taken in the international law to see the laws related climate change and how effective it has been taken as a legal approach to combat the biodiversity loss. In other words, this paper is based on doctrinal research to explain and analyze about the principles, concepts, theories of the international law regarding the climate change and biodiversity. The type of data that we have been collected in this study was based on primary and secondary data. Primary resources are used to obtain the principles and laws that are related to climate change and conserving climate change and also biodiversity. The secondary data help to formulate more questions and enable us to find the relevant answer for those questions. Book references, websites, articles, and newspapers used to do this research paper. There were many research questions were explored to conduct the depth of the exploration on this issue. Finally, the configuration can be relationships on how the climate change impacts and how it impacts the biodiversity law.
Okay, so next I will be presenting on the interlinkages between climate change and also the biodiversity. So clearly there are obviously very close ties between the natural world and the atmosphere of the earth in which biodiversity can be affected by the climate. So conserving biodiversity can help to mitigate climate change by protecting and enhancing the natural carbon capture and storage capacity of ecosystem. According to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, climate change is expected to become one of the most serious causes of biodiversity loss by end of the century. Due to the climate changes, species may no longer be adapted to environmental conditions in a given region and could therefore fall outside its climate niche. The climate-induced changes to physical systems will have cascading effects on ecological systems. These include changes in phenology, changes in species distributions, and also psychological changes. For instance, birds lay their eggs early, plants bloom and fruit sooner, and frogs are breeding sooner. Bird species, butterflies, and amphibians have changed their distribution to trends and rates consistent with recent climate changes. Apart from that, climate change will have a major link on the biological resources of the region, including agriculture, biodiversity, and availability of water. In short, it can be seen that the uncertainty due to the climate variability on different geographical areas is among the greatest challenges faced by farmers and others in the agriculture value chain in the world. Thank you.
Next, I'll present on the causes of climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the IPCC, in its authoritative fifth assessment report concluded in 2013 that warming of the climate system is unequivocal, and since the 1950s, many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades to millennia. The atmosphere and ocean have warmed, the amounts of snow and ice have diminished, sea level has risen, and the concentrations of greenhouse gases have increased. One of the major causes of climate change is the human activity. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and many other trace gases, including methane, nitrous oxide, chlorofluorocarbons, and true phosphoric ozone, are emitted and accumulated into the atmosphere by human activities such as transport and industrialization. Most human-made carbon dioxide is accounted for by burning carbon-containing fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and natural gas. Besides, in the car's engine, the combustion of gasoline produces not only carbon dioxide, but also nitrous oxide and causes true phosphoric ozone development. Chlorofluorocarbons related to the stratospheric ozone layer depletion, the refrigerants emitted from aged leaky refrigerators and air conditioners into the atmosphere. Since pre-industrial times, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations have risen by more than 40%, from around 280 parts per million by volume in the 18th century to over 400 parts per million by volume in 2015. In addition, deforestation also contributes equally to the drastic climate change. Forests generally plays a vital role in regulating the global climate. They trap air pollution, serving as a great storage mechanism for the greenhouse gases that lead to global heating or carbon sink. Forests could provide more than one-third of the overall reductions in carbon dioxide needed to sustain global warming below 2 degrees Celsius by 2030. In addition, they act as the air conditioning device of nature, transpiring water which forms clouds. Regional temperatures increase when they are felt. This contributes to drying and fires in the forest. A research shows that 8% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions are accounted by deforestation. The conversion of land, such as when forest tracts are logged or burned, releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in a higher level. Next, effects of climate change on the biodiversity. Biodiversity is in all its ways and all its experiences the abundance of life on Earth. There is no future for humanity without biodiversity, says Prof. David MacDonald from the Oxford University. Firstly, when the temperature rises drastically, several species will be affected physiologically as they have to force themselves to adapt their bodies to the new temperature spikes as they are extremely vulnerable. For instance, polar bears are regarded as the symbol of climate change in many ways. The loss of sea ice habitat had attributed to Arctic warming, causing this to become the main cause of their decline. This is because the primary food source for polar bears are seals and they require sea ice to hunt them. Moreover, other Arctic species such as walruses are facing the similar challenges due to the temperature rise which contributes to shrinking of sea ice. Next, speculated variations in the intensity, frequency, and degree of disturbances such as wildfire, cyclone, drought, and flood would put stress on established vegetation and benefit species capable of conquering denuded areas swiftly. This can cause major changes in the distribution and abundance of many indigenous species. For example, it is uncommon for the Alaskan caribou to travel long distances in search of adequate food or shelters, but as temperature increases cause the wildfires to burn hotter, it had considerably changed the species' habitat and food resources. Besides, generally plants and animals are mostly well adapted to their natural habitat and have developed a wide range of strategies for coping with the country's climatic extremes. However, the marginal emergence of the climate means that even small shifts in the patterns of rainfall could have serious impacts on wildlife. In certain regions, decreased precipitation and consequent lower river flows would have a major impact on aquatic biota. Due to the change of quality and quantity in water, freshwater wetlands such as the frogs, water birds, turtles, and other aquatic life might face extinction in the future. Finally, due to the thermal expansion of the oceans and the melting of polar ice caps and ice sheets, the sea level is expected to rise tremendously by the year 2000. The increase in sea level does not only affect the marine creatures but also contributes to coral bleaching. Many federally protected and endangered species, depending on the coastal and island habitats for survival, are facing threat as rising seas and dangerous storms surge to submerge and erode their habitat. Shifts in the location of plankton and the size of their populations could alter the biodiversity in waters of the earth. In particular, whales might bear the brunt of this as many species of whales require massive amounts of plankton to survive. Thank you.
So, in order to determine the effectiveness of international legal framework to combat the biodiversity decline in regards with climate change, it is best to first scrutinize the correlation between the objectives of these documents and the measures taken to achieve these objectives. Since our assignment is focusing on Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement of UNFCCC and Cartagena Protocol of CBD, so the effectiveness can be scrutinized by focusing on the objectives and measures taken by these legal documents. Next slide. For the UNFCCC, essentially this convention was agreed at Rio Earth Summit and entered into force on 21st March 1994. It was ratified by almost 197 countries. And the main goal of this convention is to curb the dangerous human intervention to climate system by stabilizing greenhouse gases emissions in the atmosphere at a level. So, in this regard, to further strengthen and achieve the objective of UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement were adopted. Thus, the effectiveness of UNFCCC can be further scrutinized by examining these legal documents. For the first one, Kyoto Protocol, the protocol is a key in international environmental law, and it was adopted in 1997 and came into force on 16 February 2005. The main goal of this protocol is to limit and restrict the emissions of greenhouse gases by an average of 5% below 1990 levels. However, this protocol does not compel the developing countries, which include the major carbon emitters, which is China and India, to ratify this protocol. It only targeted the industrialized countries, such as United States and Japan. Thus, the effectiveness of this protocol is hard to be achieved as the major carbon emitters still release the dangerous emissions and the developed countries won't successfully meet their emissions target. On the other hand, the protocol is still a good starting point to bring the awareness to the global concerning to the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions in order to save both environment and ecosystem. Under the protocol, clean development mechanism was laid down under Article 12 to mitigate the climate change. Further, it also highlighted one of its mechanism, which is to preserve the biodiversity, which is forest protection, because by this way, it can assist in conserving the biodiversity loss by enhancing the forest management. However, although the mechanism can work effectively, the implementation cost is quite high, so it will obstruct the effectiveness of this protocol. Next, for the Paris Agreement, next slide. It was adopted on 12 December 2015 in Paris. The main goal is to limit the global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and pursuing efforts to limit it to 1.5 Celsius. Under Article 5 of the agreement, there is a mechanism laid down under this agreement with regards to the global forest as an effort to conserve the biodiversity and ecosystem. However, according to UN Secretary General, our world is still far off track to meet the objective of this Paris Agreement, and the global temperature would go up if the world did nothing to fight the climate change. Next, even with the existence of this agreement, the extinction risk of biodiversity will still increase more than 5%, although the global temperature managed to be limited from increasing more than 2%. And the world will still reach the warmest temperature in 5 years. Regardless, the greenhouse gases emissions has fallen since the pandemic due to peak of the pandemic confinement order and economic decline since few months ago. Last but not least, this legal document won't be effective even with the existence of the technology and knowledge to reduce the emissions, as there is no strong enforcement to enforce such regulations.
Okay, the next convention that will be discussed under the effectiveness of international legal framework to combat the biodiversity loss will be Convention on Biological Diversity. The reason why this convention is important is because the correlation between climate changes and also the biodiversity loss. So this convention have three main goals, which is first, to conserve the biodiversity, second, to make a sustainable use of biodiversity, and thirdly, to have a fair and equitable sharing of the benefits gained from the genetic resources use. Alright, so this convention was discussed in November 1988 by United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, which they gathered the ad hoc working group of experts on biological diversity. This ad hoc working group, were gathered because they were asked to inspect whether there were any requirements for international convention for the biological diversity, since there were many problems and the problems were very serious to the extent threatening the extinction of species due to the human activities. So this ad hoc working group also need to inspect whether there is any need for the developed and developing countries to share the cost and benefits and how to support the local innovation. This convention was signed at United Nations Conference on Environment and Development on 5th June 1992 and later enforced on 29 December 1993. However, this convention failed to achieve the target that was set during the sign of the convention. So, the reason why this convention was failed, because first let's just look back on the Article 12A of Convention on Biological Diversity, which stated that the developing countries need to establish and maintain programs for scientific and technical education and training in measures for the identification. However, the developing countries limited capacity problem. The problem in lack of capacity in science, the administration, the lawmaker of the country itself become one of the contributing factors as why to the convention failed to achieve the target. So in the 10th meeting, which was held from 18 until 29 October 2010 in Nagoya, in Japan, they revised this convention and updated with a new strategic plan for 2011 until 2020. So this strategic plan uh, became a comprehensive framework on biodiversity because it is for the whole United Nations and all parties involved in the biodiversity management and policy development. Under this convention, there is Cartagena Protocol, which this Cartagena Protocol is in accordance with Article 19.3 of the Convention Biological Diversity. stated that the parties to contribute in order to secure the protection when involving safe transfer, handling, and also for the use of living modified organism, LMOs. So this is what Cartagena Protocol is all about. It's about to secure the protection with involving safe transfer, handling, and also the use of living modified organism. So this, like I said earlier, these protocols were emanated from the Convention on Biological Diversity that agreed at Montreal on 29 January after negotiating for 5 years. So these protocols, this Cartagena Protocol, incorporated with precautionary principle that taking into account the human health on the transboundary movement. So these protocols also initiated a biosafety clearinghouse (BSH) for the exchange of information, providing provision for capacity building and financial resources, and also giving extra attention for the developing countries. However, there were academicians that stated the issues with the effectiveness of this Cartagena Protocol, which was the higher cost needed in order to preserve the living modified organism, and because of the unknown of the living modified organism threat to the biodiversity by the scientific research, it seems like it is a waste of having this protocol since they can focus more on the true causes of the damage and loss of the biodiversity rather than the living microorganism itself. So that's all for the effectiveness of international legal framework to combat the biodiversity loss. As the conclusion for our video presentation assignment, we agree that Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement under UNFCCC and also Convention Biological Diversity and Cartagena Protocols are important in order to combat the biodiversity loss. So we agree that there might be some lacking in these both convention, but that are the reason why they should have a meeting at least for 2 years, like the Convention on Biological Diversity, in order to revise and update on the progress and implication so that there will be always improvement from time to time. As an instance, the official development assistance being a major funding source in order to help the developing countries for the biodiversity conservation should be more transparent in giving the aid to do the objectives in preserving the biodiversity. And we also agree that the developed country supposedly to give their full contribution to this because without their contribution, this convention shall still be remain nothing, such as United States of America that has signed the Convention on Biological Diversity, but until today, unfortunately, they are still silent and choose not to ratify the convention. So lastly, from our group, we agree that the world does not need the selfishness of human because we ourselves are depending on the biodiversity as well to keep on living. So that's all from Group E. Thank you for lending your ears.